Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Tape, brought to you by the Inside the Birds podcast network, hosted by myself, Clay Harbor, former Philadelphia Eagles tight end, and the man, the myth, the legend, suited up today in the blue suit.
Yeah.
Big win for the Eagles. A man who watches more tape than I would argue anybody in the business, and I'm talking even the NFL players, the coaches, even the GM, Greg Cosell. And we're here today, and what we're going to talk to you guys about is obviously the big win for the Eagles, huge win for the Eagles on a rainy Monday night in Kansas City. And then we're going to dive into a little bit of this Buffalo Bills matchup, Josh Allen versus Jalen Hurts. Bills, big win last week versus the Jets. What do the Eagles need to do to win that game? It's obviously a former Eagles coach, Sean McDermott, used to be defensive coordinator here in Philly, if you guys remember that, and a tough Buffalo team that thinks that they really righted the ship with the win against the Jets. But before we get into that, we got to start, Greg, with this big Monday Night Football matchup. The Eagles didn't look like they were playing too hot. They came out the gates a little bit sluggish, but they ended up doing what they always do, coming from behind and getting a big win. So give me your broad overview of when you put on the tape, what did you see?
Well, I got to tell you, Clay, and this never happens to me because I have, people might think I just do the Eagles, but as you know, I do the entire NFL. Yep. So, I watch as much as I can every week in addition to, actually doing my job, but I try to watch as much tape as possible. Yep. I'm going to start, and I think it's the absolute right place to start. I thought what Sean Desai did defensively to me was just brilliant. It took me 4 hours to watch that side of the ball. And normally it takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to watch one side of a ball because there's 3 angles, for each play. So, but this took me 4 hours and I take really detailed notes. I think I took more notes watching that side of the ball than I have in a long time. And I just thought with the multiplicity of what he did, I'm sure the bye week played into that. But that's coaching, as you know. Then it comes down to your assistants as well and the players, obviously. But watching that tape, I kept saying, "Wow, look at that! Look at that late rotation! Look at that coverage! Look at that movement!" There was just so much going on defensively that my guess is it was difficult for Andy Reid and his staff and for Patrick Mahomes to get a strong tendency feel as to what they were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, if you're holding Patrick Mahomes to 177 yards and a 71 quarterback rating, you are doing something right. And it wasn't all the D-line. He only gave up. He only got sacked one time.
I thought what they did in the secondary was great. They mixed up so many coverage looks. The one thing that immediately stood out, I noticed it right away, and then I had to wait to see most of the game to see it, is they made a change. And I don't know if this change will continue or if it was specific to this game, but they made Darius Big Play Slay. We always have to say big play with him. Darius Big Play Slay. They made him the boundary corner, meaning that he always played to the short side of the field, and they made Bradbury the field corner, meaning he always lined up to the wide side of the field, where previously, pretty much all the time, Bradbury was the right corner and Slay was the left corner, regardless of boundary or field. But in this game, Slay was the boundary corner, and we can certainly get into the reasons for that because there are reasons. It's nothing's done on a whim, as you know. No coach just says, "Oh, let's do this for the hell of it." The coaches don't do that. But Slay was the boundary corner and Bradbury was the field corner.
Oh yeah, I didn't even pick up on that. That's a nice little tidbit that we see. But some people will say, Greg, that, the defense looked good, but you look at these drops, man, and there's a drop here and a drop there. If MVS catches that 50-yard bomb, the Chiefs win. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes' numbers look much better.
And that's true, Clay. That's true. But I'm a process guy. Look, Patrick Mahomes is a great quarterback. I don't think there's an argument there. He's going to make great throws and great plays. And but I just thought the process of how he went about playing was really, really good.
No, I thought so too. And a couple guys that stood out. I thought Milton Williams, when he was in there, had a heck of a game, man. And he's just that run stuff where he plays with an attitude. Love Milton Williams. I thought Reed Blankenship made some nice plays too in the run game. The guy just plays tough and physical. Obviously, Roby with the big turnover, that's huge to get that turnover, that tomahawk punch on Kelsey. And having a guy that's really knows what he's doing in the slot is important. Byard, big interception there. So some of these pickups starting to show up for Howie Roseman here. Some of these guys that he brought in, and then, obviously Roby got beat late. But, overall, I thought that the new players played pretty well. So what did you see from Byard and Roby as a couple of these guys that haven't had an Eagles jersey on for too long? How do you think Byard did? How do you think Roby did in the slot?
It's interesting because I was going to mention those two things, so I'm glad you just led me right into it.
Yeah.
That's what I guess they call that a segue in the business, But Byard, they used him as the primary man-to-man defender on Kelsey. Now there were snaps in which they had over/under, where in a sense they were doubling Kelsey. And they did that specific situations, at times third down, other selected situations. But Byard was pretty much the man-to-man defender on Kelsey. And Byard has done that throughout his career. When he was with the Titans, they played the Chiefs several times, and he always was the matchup on Kelsey. So that was not new to him. The other thing I found fascinating, and it relates to what you just said about Roby, is Roby was the slot corner on first and second down, but the large majority of third downs, Eli Ricks was the slot corner. And when I'm watching tape, that's when I wish like I had the bat phone and I could just, call Sean Desai and he'd pick up and he would tell me the reason for that, because I just, I'd love to know what the reason for that is. I don't know the reason for that.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to see that Eli Ricks is still in there. Maybe they're just kind of trying to give him some time, Roby, before he's fully in the game. Maybe cut down his snaps a little bit. Give Ricks, a package here to play. So, number of reasons, like you said, it would be nice to be inside that room and really know what they're doing there.
Third down is that high leverage critical down, and that's when Ricks was the slot corner. So they had a reason for that. But Roby, it's important that he's back. He's a really good slot corner. He's played that in his career. But yeah, I would just love to know why Ricks was the third down slot corner. But I guess maybe I'll find that out at some point down the road. But I'm not going to find that out in the next 30 seconds, so I'm not going to have an answer.
Yeah. Unless, like you said, unless you got Sean Desai over here on speed dial. So we talked about the secondary. Did you see anything up front with the D line that was that you liked there? And obviously the Eagles only got that one sack, but I feel like they did affect Patrick Mahomes on a couple different plays there, and they did give up more rushing yards than they have all season long. And obviously in the first, they gave up 123 rushing yards, came back, had a better second half, but 168 rushing yards on the ground total for this defense that really was doing great most of the year, giving up 66 yards a game, second in the NFL. So how are the Chiefs able to run the ball on the Eagles defensive line on the tape? Are they doing anything special?
I thought there were 3 runs that ended up all being, I believe, 15-plus yard runs. One, I believe, was 24 yards. So, if you add those 3 runs up, you're talking probably in the 60-yard range, and that's just on 3 runs, where the Eagles did not set the edge. I'm sure you remember these plays. They just did not set the edge. That's a mistake by a player. Reddick was one of them. I think Cunningham might have been one of them. And that allowed twice Pacheco to bounce and once Clyde Edwards-Helaire to bounce. And so they were just individual mistakes, assignment mistakes, as opposed to any kind of problem in the structure of their defense. It was just, someone made a mistake. Look, about setting the edge. You played for the New England Patriots and how important something like that is for Bill Belichick. He probably says that in his sleep.
Yeah, that's a huge aspect. And I did see some of those things you're talking about. Setting the edge there is huge, and they did lack on that. And it was one of those games where I felt like they weren't blowing the Eagles off the ball, but they were running, like you said. There's just specific plays. You're not setting the edge. You're getting reached inside, and they're just creating holes. It's more of a finesse run game. It wasn't like they're running power, they're running duo, they're running these downhill ISO runs to really just power through these guys. They're kind of running around them, and that's the way I tried to explain it. Is I didn't see them giving up ground. They're not playing on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, because that's just something you can't do against this D-line. But Andy Reid and this offensive line found some ways to really run the football, and especially early, and I was very impressed with that. So just to finish up on the defensive side of the ball, Greg, how about the linebacking core? Do you see anything from Zach Cunningham and Nick Morrow?
Let me say this. I think one point we have to make is the Eagles played 6 snaps of 0, and they started early in the game. I believe on the second possession we saw it for the first time, and you would think that would be surprising, playing 6 snaps of 0. Now, again, some could say, hey, well, they weren't that worried about the receivers. Again, we don't know the reason for it, but that's a lot of snaps of 0. There are teams that go through a whole season and don't play 6 snaps of 0, and they played 6 snaps in one game. As you know, that's not necessarily a common coverage depending on who the coordinator is. Because you are potentially, there's nobody in the deep middle. There's no safety valve. There's no one who can cover up for mistakes. So I was surprised by that, but it worked.
Yeah, and Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback against 0 coverage in the NFL. And then if we look at the offensive side of the ball for the Eagles, obviously Jalen Hurts didn't have the big numbers, but I thought Jalen Hurts just did what Jalen Hurts always does. I think not enough has been made by this. As a player, you're playing in Kansas City. Obviously, it's a tough place to play. It's raining. It's windy. It's wet. People, why aren't these quarterbacks having – the elements matter. You're cold. You're wet. The ball's wet. It's harder to throw the football. And no one wants to talk about this. They're just talking about numbers and these passing numbers, both teams. The elements matter. It's tough to play in those games. You're not going to just throw the ball around 30 times, get 30 completions in those games. I'm sorry. Nobody wants to talk about the game the way it's just they try to – you have to realize that these elements are tough to play. Trust me, you go into these games, the coaches will tell you, guys, it's raining out there. You know what kind of game it's going to be before the game. It's going to be ground and pound, physical dogfight of a football game, and we got to win. We're not going to be slinging the ball around like that. So that matters. The context matters. If it's a 70 degrees, no wind, beautiful day, and you have these numbers, okay, maybe there's something to worry about. But in this context, no, there's not. Neither team had the big games. It's harder to catch the football. It's harder to throw the football. You're not going to put up the same numbers. And that being said, I thought Jalen Hurts played a good game. I thought he did everything he needed to do to lead his team to victory. When you watch the tape, Greg, what did you see from Hurts? I know there's a lot of people in the national media saying that he didn't play up to snuff or as good as he can, and they're comparing – some people are comparing Jordan Love to him and with his numbers. So what did you see on tape?
Again, it's always hard to know unless Jalen Hurts would tell you, and he's not going to, what impact the weather conditions had. There were certainly dropbacks in this game when he was too quick to break down in the pocket when there was no pressure. I think he dropped his eyes. Now, Clay, that could be a function of what you said. That could be a function that maybe he wasn't real comfortable throwing the ball. We don't know the answer to that. But I thought the Eagles made a really good adjustment. We talked last week about the Super Bowl and about the fact that he had 10 design runs in the Super Bowl in the first half alone. Well, in this game, he had 1 in the first half, and I believe, was it 7 or 8, a significantly higher number in the second half. And that's a combination of really good coaching. Maybe even Jalen was involved in saying, hey, this could work. Again, he knows he's on the field playing. That's a different perspective, obviously, than the coach. But I thought that whoever's decision it was to run the ball more, but with design runs with Jalen Hurts was a really good decision, and it was effective in the second half.
I agree, and I'll even go on record here and say that I know there's a lot of people talking trash about obviously Brian Johnson and some of his play calling. But I'll say in like say the quarterback draw on 3rd and 8, I thought that was a good call. You look at that scheme, you look at that film. If Kelsey doesn't get beat by Chris Jones in that play, that 3rd down in the first half when they called that quarterback draw, Jalen Hurts might run for 20. He might run for more. There was literally no second-level defender right there. And obviously, in the context of the game, I think some of his stuff makes more sense. But like I said, people don't realize that those games are not easy to throw the football the way that you typically play, and you got to change your game plan a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously he had the big throw to Devonta Smith on the touchdown drive that ended up, giving them the win. And I thought that was really good. If that was a 2-by-2 set, and the linebacker Gay was initially lined up over Smith. And by the way, one thing that they always do, almost always, nothing's 100%, is they almost always line up Devonta Smith in the slot to the boundary when he's in the slot. And the reason they do that is because normally to the field, normally teams view the field as the passing strength because there's more, and so Smith very often does not get, the slot corner. Certainly if they're an empty. They were not an empty here. But this particular play, Mike Edwards, the safety, was lined up over Smith. And so Jalen read that. They had Willie Gay initially lined up over Devonta Smith, but he was not going to play him, so he ended up rushing, and the line slid that way anyway, so they had that taken care of, and then he attacked the matchup. He beautifully attacked the matchup of Smith, on Edwards, and it was a great ball.
Yeah, it was a beautiful ball, and that was one of the differences in the game right there is A.J. Brown, when you're watching the film, was he just not getting open? What were you seeing there from A.J. Brown, or was it just one of those days? Because there's a lot of fans, saying.
Yeah, I think it's one of those days. I mean, Jalen only threw, I believe, 23 balls. One thing about the Chiefs, and not that Brown can't do this, but the Chiefs play a lot of press. They don't make it easy for receivers. It wasn't a passing game kind of day. I just think it was one of those days. Look, we've seen that, we've become used to A.J. Brown, who's in the conversation as the best wide receiver in football this given season. We've just gotten used to his numbers being astronomical, but sometimes that happens. Every game plays out differently. I think your point about the weather is a great one. It just wasn't a game where you're going to just drop back and start chucking it all over the yard. That wasn't that kind of game.
It definitely wasn't that kind of game. And, a guy that I was really impressed with, and like I said, if I'm blocking and this guy's in my backfield, I'm excited about getting him the ball. I mean, he's a tough runner. He reminds me a little bit about my teammate when I was in Philly named Shady McCoy. And obviously I'm talking about DeAndre Swift, man. This guy runs hard. And in a game where, you're down a weapon and Dallas Goedert already, then A.J. Brown doesn't have a big game. He needed someone to step up. And Swift came through in the run game and the pass game. He had a couple big catches. Yeah. He had some big runs. He really was he got in the end zone there, and he had that 35-yard run.
And that was a great play. I mean, they lined up in, the pony package, meaning they had two running backs on the field, Swift and Scott. And the 35-yarder came out of that pony package where Scott was the eye back and Swift was kind of a wing player, and he went in jet action, and he took the handoff and got around the edge with great blocks by Stoll and Mailata. So that was a really, that was a really interesting call, and it was an effective play call, but they lined up in that pony package a number of times.
Yeah, no, I liked how they were moving guys around. So what did you see with Goddard being out, Greg, when you turned on that film? Or did you see what you expected to see? Obviously, you saw some Calcaterra, you saw some Alberto, you saw a lot more of Jack Stoll. What did you see? Did they do anything specifically when you were looking at the offense to offset Dallas Goedert being out?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. They didn't throw it to the tight end very much. So, that's hard to know. I mean, I can't really answer that, so I don't want to make something up. Again, the one thing they didn't do in this game, and it gets back to your point, is they did not attack with the passing game at the intermediate and verticals, which is normally a foundation of what they do. Was it the weather? Did they not think they could protect well? We don't know the answer to that, but they certainly didn't do that in this game. Again, without knowing the answer, but that's one thing we know. The other thing they did in this game, and this is something that is a function of Goddard being out, is they had, I believe, 11 snaps of 10 personnel, meaning one back and 4 wide receivers, and Julio Jones being the 4th. So they had 11 snaps of that, and that clearly, Clay, was a function of Goddard being out.
Yeah, and I think that I don't want to talk bad on the tight ends, but I mean, there's just a huge drop off after.
Oh yeah, Goddard's a
And,
top 5 tight end in the
yeah,
league.
and I feel like this is one of the only positions on the roster where there is such a drastic drop off from number 1 to 2. So before we move on, a couple clips of tape here. What's your take on the offensive line? I thought they looked better. I thought Jurgens made a difference. I mean, his physicality and the way he plays football. He's a guy that likes to fire off and be physical, take the fight to him. And obviously, Kelsey didn't have the best game. Lane Johnson didn't have the best game. Landon Dickerson didn't have – none of those guys really had their best game. But, overall, I thought they played solid enough to move the football and get the win. And like you said, Jalen Hurts didn't help them on a few occasions, holding the ball, tucking it down a little bit too quick. So what was your thoughts on the O-line?
I thought they struggled at times throughout the game. They were not the dominant unit that we normally see. I thought that showed up in the passing game, especially in the first half. So, yes, this was not their best game. It wasn't as bad as the Jets game, which was clearly their worst game of the year. But they struggled a bit in this game. But they were playing a really good D-line unit. So, in some ways, maybe you expect that. And don't forget, Spagnuolo, I think that Spags does as good a job as any coordinator in the league with his pressure concepts and the use of defensive backs in the pressures. He's the best in the league at that.
Yeah, obviously we saw that sack early where Lane just didn't see the slot defender. The slot rusher there was lined up over the receiver and just came and obviously forced the fumble. Luckily, Jalen was able to recover. But all right, let's look at just a couple of clips before we move on to Buffalo. And we only got 2 for you guys today, but still, this is inside the tape. So on inside the tape, we got to take a look at some game film, Greg. I mean, because that's what it's about.
Hey, it's Jeff Mosher. Here's some advice for you. Skip the arguments with Uncle Dave on Thanksgiving and focus on what really matters. That's good football, boosted odds, and hitting those Turkey Day parlays. Picture this, not just watching games, but turning every second into a potential win. With MyBookie, you can stream the games and live bet them and turn any game day into a payday. Ready to up your game? Sign up today and make your first deposit with promo code GUNN, G-U-N-N, for a sweet deposit bonus up to $1,000. That's promo code GUNN, G-U-N-N, to claim your bonus. This isn't just a promo code. It's your secret weapon to get the extra edge on the house. The best part is you don't need to be a sports whiz to win at MyBookie. You can cash in on everything from politics to your favorite shows and then some. Bet anything, anytime, and anywhere only with MyBookie. I love the fall because football's back, but it's also my busiest season. Between work, kids going back to school, youth sports and activities, there's just not enough time, especially to make a good home-cooked meal. That's why I love HelloFresh. They deliver farm-fresh food with pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes right to my doorstep. No more wasting time at the grocery store because America's #1 meal kit helps make home cooking easy, efficient, and affordable. We don't waste time researching new recipes and planning meals. With HelloFresh, the shopping's already done. The perfect amount of ingredients arrive with step-by-step recipe cards. How efficient is that? Plus, HelloFresh saves you time and money. HelloFresh is 25% less expensive than takeout, so you'll get a home-cooked meal without digging deep into your wallet. Don't forget about taste and selection. HelloFresh makes food for meat lovers, seafood lovers, vegetarians, and those who love variety. My personal favorites are the spicy Creole stew and pecan-crusted trout, 2 dinners my whole family enjoyed, and we actually had time to sit down together and eat at the table. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Eagles and use the code 50Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/50Eagles. Use that code 50Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. Act now for America's #1 meal kit.
I'm not a big fan of this counter play. I don't think the Eagles have the personnel with the tight ends to run it. Obviously here Jurgens gets stonewalled in the hole, and that's a problem. Jurgens doesn't get any movement. He kind of gets stalled in the hole there. I'm not sure if that's Chris Jones, the hard man to move. It looks like it is.
Chris Jones.
And
yeah, he got handled by Chris Jones there.
Yeah, and the tight ends, they're just just not cut out for this type of play. Stoll pulling or Calcaterra getting any kind of space. He got his body put in the hole. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. The coaches teach you to not let your body be put in the hole. And then here is the hated third down, Greg. And this is what I wanted to see. This is the quarterback draw that everybody hated, right? And you see a 5 down front. And if we back it up, we obviously got this cornerback, this nickel back over. Is he coming? Is he not? You know, what happens with this safety? But there's a lot of space here. They're daring the Eagles to run a quarterback draw, in my opinion.
Yeah. And obviously it didn't work.
Didn't work. And, you know, Brian Johnson, you know, probably sees the same thing, right? Okay, this is right before the snap. If Kelsey makes this block and Gainwell leads up on the guy guarding him man-to-man, then this could be a big play. But just because, obviously, Kelsey will make that block 9 times out of 10, in my opinion. Even if it is Chris Jones, he'll at least stay in front of him long enough. Then there's a lot of green right there, Greg. Greg, you could run this one, man.
Maybe a long time ago, Clay, a long time ago.
Yeah. So
now I'd be a torn Achilles waiting to happen.
Yeah. And then take a peek at an Eagles defensive possession here.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in this game, and I know it's Eagles talk, but it's a concern for the Chiefs, is their tackles, offensive tackles, could not block one-on-one. And there's going to be a lot of teams that they're going to struggle with that. And they started to have to use Kelsey to chip, the back to chip. And once they start to have to use Kelsey to chip, that changes everything about their offense, because that presents limitations. It shrinks your offensive menu, because they can't Smith at left tackle and Taylor at right tackle. They could not protect one-on-one versus Reddick and Sweat.
And it's funny, you were talking about setting the edge earlier, and you see Sweat peeking inside.
Yeah,
this is what happened. Sweat was not disciplined on this play. He's peeking inside. Next thing you know, the ball gets bounced outside.
There you go. That might be one of the runs I was talking about.
Yeah.
And by the way, Pacheco, again, he's not an Eagle, but he's a fun guy to watch run.
Fun guy to watch. But that's just,
you know, he reminds me of, you'll remember this player, Clay. He reminds me, with the sort of violence and tenacity, the way he runs, of Marion Barber.
Oh, yeah, Marion the Barbarian, man. Of course I remember Marion Barber. Yeah, he's got that energy, that juice to him.
Yep.
There you got it, guys. We showed you some tape. We gave you our tape, what was on the tape, and the Eagles win. Big win for the Birds. It wasn't pretty. It was a tough day out. It was a gritty win. We all know it's one of Jalen Hurts' favorite sayings. And let's move on to a quick preview for you guys of what the Eagles have in store next week. So, Greg, overview of the Bills. Are coming off of a big win. What are your thoughts? Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen had a big game, 3 touchdowns, 108 rating. Are they back?
Well, everybody's going to talk about the change in coordinator and you know what some of the things they did that maybe we hadn't seen prior. And I think watching their tape, because I've watched the Bills for years and years and years. I'm fortunate enough to do some work up on One Bills Live. So one of the things that stood out to me immediately was a little bit more extensive use of motion. And I think that's something now the Eagles will look at, and they'll obviously have a plan, but that's something the Bills did. And see, ultimately, you know, what you're trying to do, in my view, and, you know, I'm a believer in this. Josh Allen is the most physically gifted quarterback in the league, which is not the same as saying the best, you know, but he's the most physically gifted quarterback in the league. And he's pretty close to being one of the best too, obviously. But he's a certain kind of player, Clay. He's very much of an instinctive kind of player. In other words, his game at its core is not necessarily built on precision, the way you think of, you know, the Tom Brady's, the Drew Brees, the Joe Burrows. But at some point, you have to work toward getting him better within that kind of structure. You can't just live off, hey, we got Josh Allen and he's going to make Superman plays. Because you know what? He'll make some of them and they look phenomenal. And maybe he's the only guy that makes those, but you can't live like that. So I thought that they did a better job in this game with the use of motion, with the use of route concepts, of allowing him to drop back, get a more defined read and throw within the structure. And I think that's what Joe Brady, the new coordinator, is going to keep working toward. Because Josh Allen, he does have a tendency to want to leave the pocket early, even when there's no pressure. That's just who he is. That's how he plays. But when you do that, well, you can make some great plays. You also, to use the term that you've heard, we've all heard 1,000 times, you leave some throws on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just a perfect summary of Josh Allen. You hit the nail on the head. And Joe Brady, a quick Joe Brady story, Greg. When I was with the New Orleans Saints, Joe Brady was just starting off his coaching career, and it was in 2017. He was the assistant tight end coach under Dan Campbell. So Dan Campbell was my tight end coach. Unbelievable guy. Love Dan Campbell. A guy who knows so much about football. Just a great dude. Taught me so much. Was still in touch with him this offseason. Only had a year with him. Awesome guy. But Joe Brady was the assistant tight end coach. Joe was the guy that I would talk to every day and go over notes with, would throw the ball to me before practice, throw me routes on air. Joe Brady. But this dude is smart, meticulous, intelligent, loves to throw the football, and just has a football mind. And this guy you ask him any question, Joe would know the answer to. Dan would be asking Joe. Dan's a head tight end coach, been in the league for 10 years. Joe, what do we have here? And Joe would know right away. So this guy's meticulous. He's good. And I expect him to have a long, great career just because how hardworking he is. And I remember when he was the assistant tight end coach, how good and how much he knew. One of the first guys in the building, last guys in the league. You don't watch as much tape as you, but he's probably number 2 on the list. This guy's watching some film.
It's funny you say that because I think he spent 2 years with the Saints and then went to LSU in 2019 with the Burrow, Chase, Justin Jefferson, that group that won the national championship and was, put up ridiculous numbers. But the one thing based on what you just said, and obviously him and you played for him, so you know exactly the way he goes about doing it. I think you have to work with Josh Allen that way. You have to quarterback at its core, contrary to what a lot of people might think because they see the great plays when guys run around and do all that. But quarterback at its core, and look, you were in New Orleans when Sean Payton was there, obviously. So you know how it's taught. It's a detailed, nuanced, disciplined craft position. It's not, we're going to roll the ball out today and let's see what, if we can make a play. That's not the way the good offensive coaches deal with the position. And, Josh Allen is one of those guys that can make a play at any time in a game, but that's not the way you want to teach the position and have him execute it snap after snap.
Absolutely. So just to do a quick broad overview of the offense and defense before we look at a couple clips here, Greg, obviously Buffalo Bills, you turn on the film, they obviously got James Cook, who is running the heck out of the ball, Stephon Diggs. Those are the 2 big-name guys. Dalton Kincaid. Who's a matchup that you could see the Eagles struggling with here? Do you like Kincaid? Do you think, obviously Stephon Diggs spends a lot of time in the slot. I think half his time's in the slot. Who do you see causing some problems for the Birds?
Well, one thing about the Bills, and I've said this for a number of years, and I just don't understand, watching tape why people don't quite get it. They are not a highly, highly talented offense in terms of personnel. Stephon Diggs is a very good receiver, but Stephon Diggs is really a high-level possession receiver. I personally base purely on film, and that's all everything I say is based on that. I would not put Diggs in the category of the Jeffersons, the Jamar Chases, those kinds of guys. I don't think Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, I don't think he's that guy. He's really, really good at what he is, but he's not a vertical dimension. Okay? Yeah. So they don't really have that guy. Now, Kincaid, they're trying to work in, and stylistically, Kincaid is like Travis Kelce, but he's a rookie. So they're trying to figure out, how to get him more and more involved each and every week. But they don't have a lot more at wide receiver. Khalil Shakir can be a very good slot, and he's another young player that we'll see how that goes. But they are not a highly talented offense. Josh Allen has made so many special plays through the years that people just assume they're talented. So I think that if you're talking about players that you feel like, hey, These are the guys they're going to try to work the ball to. You're going to have Diggs and Kincaid. Those are the two guys.
Yeah, and Shakur did have, you mentioned him, had a big game last week.
Yeah, the 81-yard touchdown. That was a big-time throw. Not a lot of guys can sit on their back foot and drive the ball like that.
No, absolutely not. That was very impressive to see. And then looking at the defense, Greg, when you look on the film, broad overview, you got obviously veterans like Jordan Poyer. You got Shaq Lawson. Well, you had Shaq Lawson. You have Tyrell Dodson. You got some players out there. So what are you seeing on the defensive side of the ball for the Bills? And what is Sean McDermott doing? Is he doing the same stuff he did in Philly?
Not exactly. No. I mean, they've had so many injuries, Clay. I mean, Matt Milano, who's one of the top 3 or 4 linebackers in the league, is obviously out for the season. Von Miller is not yet back to being Von Miller. They lost Tre'Davious White, a really, really good corner. They've got 2 really good safeties who've played together a long time. Jordan Poyer, who was originally, I believe, a 7th-round pick of the Eagles as a corner. He's been a really good safety in this league. Micah Hyde, an Iowa safety. Iowa seems to put out tight ends and safeties in this league. They're really good players. They're struggling a bit at corner. That's why they traded for Rasul Douglas at the trading deadline, who's now starting and playing every snap. They rely very heavily on their down 4 for pass rush pressure. Their blitzing is very selective. Their man coverage is selective. They play a lot of zone. I think they played the highest percentage of 2 shell coverage of any team in the league. So that's what they are. They're not, their defense has been struggling a bit here and there because they've lost a lot of really good players, and that's just the way it is. You got to still play the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know Von Miller and Leonard Floyd are always dangerous, and Shaq Lawson when he's in there, but this isn't the defense that the Buffalo Bills are used to seeing, and I think that's one of their problems. So let's take a couple looks here at some of the Bills' plays, Greg. Just like I said, this is inside the tape. Let's watch a little bit of tape here before we get out of here. Let's share here, put on some Bills offense to start. So obviously we got Josh Allen, and I think this
is a hell of a throw.
Yeah. And obviously that's his main man right there, Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, it's Diggs.
Just a nice stutter. Allen's, we all know he's got the big arm. Got Sauce Gardner there with the body slam. Yeah, Kincaid's not happy about it.
I mean, you know how it works, Clay. In the defensive back meeting rooms this week for the Eagles, they're going to say, "Hey, Josh is going to throw us a few," and he may or may not, but that's what they're going to be saying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. They're going to say they're going to be able to get some plays, some interceptions from Josh Allen. He's a guy that likes to take chances, but with those chances, come some interceptions. That was a big hit there.
The other thing is they ran the ball a bit more last week. Now, granted, they were in control of that game. So, I think that lent itself to running the ball with more volume. We'll see if that's something that continues, Clay, because I think they've been a very much pass-heavy team. And I don't know if their O-line is quite good enough. Here's Cook out of the backfield. I don't think their O-line is quite good enough to survive in a pass-heavy game. Certainly not against the Eagles, but even in general. And I think that's one reason why you see Allen move so much is that O-line is not really one of those secure O-lines that gives you a clean pocket a lot. So, we'll see.
No, absolutely. And obviously the Jets offense has a number of issues, but I was impressed with how they were able to move the ball against this Jets defense.
Yeah, they moved it pretty well. Like I said, they ran it pretty well.
Yeah. And here's Diggs again over the middle. So that's a guy they're going to have to account for.
Yeah, Diggs and Kincaid are really their 2 main receivers.
Yeah, just a nice little zone, shallow route.
Here's the touchdown.
Yeah, getting Josh Allen on the move, and that's just speed right there.
That was a nice play.
And that's just speed, and that's what the Buffalo Bills offense is capable of doing. And this is against a good New York Jet defense. And you think he has an angle, he just outruns them.
This is Ty Johnson, who is a pretty good receiver as well. I remember doing him when he came out of Maryland about 5 years ago. He's actually a pretty explosive player, and he got some meaningful snaps in this game.
Yeah.
And defensively, they're one of those sound defenses. They just
Yeah.
don't have, they're missing a lot of pieces. They're, and that's hurt them a lot.
Yeah. Definitely. So this is definitely a winnable game for our Birds. We'll
for sure.
show you one more clip here. And obviously the Jets only put up 6 points, but their quarterback is Zach Wilson, who I'm not trying to be facetious here, but I honestly think I might be able to do some of the things he does, Greg. Get me out there.
It's a shame. I mean, he's just,
Ooh.
I don't know if he'll get another opportunity at this point. He's not very good.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you have it. That was a recap of the Birds versus the Kansas City Chiefs, what we saw on the tape. And then we gave you guys a little bit of a preview for what to expect moving forward with the Birds versus the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. And from myself, Clay Harbor, former Eagles tight end, and the man, the myth, the legend himself, Greg Cosell. That was Inside the Tape, brought to you by the Inside the Birds Podcast Network. And we will see you guys next week. Happy holidays.